Hello and welcome to our second podcast for the upcoming 2021 Houston PPDM Expo, coming to you in October on the 25th and 26th. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andy Garrett, and I'm a member of the Houston Leadership Team, a volunteer group within the PPDM Association, managing events and get-togethers here in the Houston area. We are a global non-for-profit society within the petroleum industry that provides leadership for professional data management and are hosts of the Houston Expo. Throughout these podcasts, we want to introduce you to some of the speakers and topics that you can expect at the Expo this year and take some time to dive a little bit deeper into their presentations. Joining me today is John Thibeaux, who goes by Thibeaux for short, and Curley Thomas. Thibeaux is a senior data analyst within the reservoir management function, and Curley is an enterprise data performance manager, both from Chevron here in Houston. Welcome, Thibeaux and Curley. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Awesome. Well, let's dive straight in. Thibeaux, I love your title, Applying What is a World Taxonomy within Chevron. So tell us a little bit more about your presentation.
Sure. So we use the what is a World Taxonomy as kind of an anchor for a lot of our data integration work. So what we do is when we go out, we have a large business units all over the world. And, in these different business units, we have some diversity in schemas and, different functional interpretations of data. So we really use the taxonomy as a key part of our data model. And it's kind of like an anchor for us. When we go out and we work with a business unit, it's the anchor from which we integrate data. So since we use it as the anchor, it's a big part of our engagement materials. So on the PPDM website, there's the beautiful website with all the materials. We use those materials plus our own internal materials to help us speak the same language and kind of get to a common understanding of what's going on with the data. And one of the real interesting examples is we were working with our Gulf of Mexico business unit, and two of the PPDM concepts around contact interval and completion. And we were sharing, kind of the official Chevron view of it. And in their data model, they actually had the reverse, right? So what they called a contact interval, we called a completion, and what we called a completion, they called a contact interval. So, by having these engagement materials and having the discussion, we could actually come to the same page. And, imagine if we weren't on the same page, right? We're basically using the same words, but talking about totally different things. So, that anchor kind of helps us have those discussions and helps us integrate data the right way. And so that's pretty much how we use it.
Awesome. Well, so without giving away all of your presentation secrets, how has adopting what is a World Taxonomy changed how your users use and understand the data they use every day?
Sure. I mean, one of the key points is we're not trying to shove this down everyone's throat, right? We're using it as the anchor for our data integration, right? So, when we walk into a business unit, we know that there's engineers and geologists that have their own vocabulary developed over time. And, and they also have their own systems with their own data models that has, their own language embedded. So, our hope is to kind of, draw the line, so to speak, when we have, integration projects that for multiple business units or multifunction, we really want that data to be based on a common schema. So, the goal when we walk in is really just to help align. And then so when we integrate data into a common system, people know how to use it. So that's where we pretty much have some of the most success. Where we have some challenges are on some really specific terms. So like the term completion. Every time the word completion is brought up, depending on whether you're working with a completions engineer, a productions engineer, or a geologist, the term completion can evoke several different terms. So, and if we're looking at a data system and there's a completion table, the records could vary widely in terms of what's actually in the data. So, one of the challenging things is really coming to alignment on some of those concepts. And we've used, the what is a completion handout as a way to help kind of have some of those discussions. And I'd say completion is probably where we have the biggest challenge.
Now, of course, here at PPDM, we love the what is a well, and you've kind of started talking about challenges already, but what would you put as kind of one or two of your top key challenges around implementing the standard within Chevron across the board?
Across the board, definitely, alignment and clarity with different functional people. I mean, we use the diagrams, but it's still a challenge, right? Because people tend to kind of naturally go back to their own vocabulary and their nomenclature, right? Because we're talking about engineers that have been doing this stuff for 30, 40 years sometimes. And so, we have to keep bringing up our materials to kind of anchor our discussions. And the second, I would just say is even communication within like the data analyst, data engineer, data architect community. Just to let them know that, hey, we do have a standard, education about the standard, and making sure that they're also anchored, because they're really the front line of defense. Well, if you think about it, working with the business on using those models. So we really need to make sure that all the data professionals are anchored in that. Because otherwise, when they go out and model systems, they may violate some of the principles we've tried to establish. So I would say the users one, and then the data professionals too.
And if I could echo or add on to that, keep in mind Chevron as a corporation, we have 15 business units, 13 digital platforms. So it's important, and it's a challenge to align the enterprise on a lot of things. But the PPDM taxonomy, what it does help us do is to align the enterprise on common terminology and those associated definitions. So I think Thibeaux hit the nail on the head. This is allowing us to support that and make it easier. It's not easy, right? Because you've got that many different business units, but it gives us a good roadmap for how everyone can align to some common definitions.
Fantastic. Appreciate that, Curley and Thibeaux. Absolutely. Now, I'm sure you guys have lots of lessons learned and key ways of implementing this that you found incredibly valuable, but I don't want you to give those away right now. Those of you listening, if you want to learn those tips and tricks, you'll definitely have to come and join Thibeaux for his presentation of the Expo later on this year. Now, changing channel a little bit, I know that Chevron has been very active in the Open Subsurface Data Universe Forum, especially around data standards. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're leveraging your experience with what is a well to help advance the goals of OSDU?
Sure. One of our big goal is to try to do the same thing we did in Chevron, right? So you think about, we're able to implement some consistency across business units and across function. We want to apply the same thing into OSDU and enable that, for Chevron and for the industry, right? So that, different software vendors, we can kind of all get on the same page. And one of the first, observations I've made, we started this in the fourth quarter of last year. We brought some proposals based on this. And the first thing, I immediately adopted a new level of respect for what it must be like to organize a PPDM working group, because getting alignment is hard. It's one thing when you're in Chevron, right? And you can say, hey, this is the standard. Let's kind of work towards this. People generally, kind of work with you, right? And when you do have pushback, you can say, well, this is the standard. It's above my pay grade. And everyone just kind of, works it out. But when you're bringing this to the industry, it's a whole different ball game. So, but I will say that what we've been doing since the fourth quarter of last year is we're starting to get to a point where we're starting to finalize parts of the schema, and we're honoring a lot of the precision that's in what is a well, what makes it so valuable. So that's what we're doing, and hopefully by the time September rolls around, we'll have some more specific updates on that.
Fantastic. Well, hey, we really appreciate everything you're doing with What Is a Well and how you're driving that forwards within the OSDU community as well. So really excited to see what that brings, as you say, throughout the rest of this year and as that forum evolves as well. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for in the podcast today. So let me thank you, Thibeaux, and you, Curley, for spending some time with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And obviously to Chevron for allowing you guys to get out there and do this with us. So thank you again so much for that. To all our listeners, you'll be able to catch Thibeaux's presentation again at the Houston Expo. That's October 25 and 26, live and in person. Please visit the PPDM website at www.ppdm.org if you haven't already registered to get on there and book your space for this great event later on this year. I'd also like to thank the rest of the Houston leadership team for their hard work pulling together both this podcast and the event, and we look forward to our next podcast coming to you very soon. Again, both of you, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.